happy to be here. Thank you all very much.
Herman, I obviously don't need to give you an introduction, so I'm going to go ahead and sit down and go ahead and do your thing.
Well, thank you very much. Let me first say, again, I want to thank everybody for coming to this event. Obviously, I would have liked to have been there in person, but there's only one of me. And they haven't perfected yet. But a couple of things. First, the state of our accusation, what we can do about it. And then third, the state of my campaign. Because there have been a lot of rumors swirling around out there. And I want to basically put them to bed. Because that's what happens when you start making progress and start moving up in the polls. People start shooting at you. Now, first of all, I don't have to belabor to interview the situation we face as a nation. President Obama and the Democrats are trying to pretend that it's not as bad as it is, but it is. We have a moral crisis. We have an economic crisis. We have an entitlement spending crisis. We have an immigration crisis. We have a foggy foreign policy crisis. And most of all, we have a deficiency of leadership crisis in the White House. The best indication of that is this current so-called debate that's going on about raising the debt ceiling. I've had several reporters ask me, what would Herman Cain do if he were president? And the answer is, I never would have let it become a crisis in the first place. A year ago, I, along with many other economists and business people, predicted that this president and the Democrats were going to allow this debt ceiling situation to run up to the last minute and then go to the American people and first accuse the Republicans of not wanting to cooperate, and secondly, tell the American people that in order to basically avert this crisis, that they needed to raise taxes. I saw it coming. Many of you saw it coming. This is the typical tactic that the liberals have used to try and continue to spend more and more of our money, raise taxes, spend money on failed programs. This is just another one of their class warfare tactics. And so earlier today, I was on Judge Napolitano's show. And he said, Mr. Cain, what would you do if you were president? I said, I would not raise the debt limit. And he said, well, what about all of the gnashing of teeth and all that the harm is going to do? And they keep talking about how bad it's going to be. My response, folks, if I were in this situation, and I would be, I would make sure that we pay the interest on the debt, we pay our military and their families, we pay people on Social Security, we pay people's Medicare bills, and everything else is on the table. And if that meant shutting down the government, shut it down. Because as you know, this is an the first time that we faced this debt limit situation. And every time it comes up, the Democrats and the liberals want to come up with some very convincing arguments as to why we must do this. Let me tell you what we must do. We must change the occupant of the White House in 2012. I don't have to elaborate on all of the issues and all of the crises we have, because we have many. But here's the good news. We can fix these problems. But we cannot fix these problems with the same lack of leadership. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running for President of the United States, because I happen to believe that my business experience, my problem-solving skills are just as applicable in Washington, D.C. as president as they were throughout my career. So the state of the nation is in a very, very fragile situation. And unfortunately, it is much worse than most people realize, and it is much worse than this administration is telling people. Here's what we can do. I call them common sense solutions. Many of you have a copy of my Common Sense Solutions booklet. If you don't, the information is available online at my website, hermancain.com. But here's what we need to do, folks. The engine to moving this economy is the business sector. We've got to fuel the engine. And we fuel the engine with tax cuts for businesses, for workers, and also take the capital gains tax rate to zero so we can generate some cash for the small business. We also need equal tax holidays that I'll talk about in my economic vision. And we also need to suspend taxes on repatriated profits. You see, all of the policies of the Obama administration have put things in the caboose of the train. Health care, $1 trillion in stimulus spending that didn't stimulate the economy, and all of the other regulatory barriers that they created for businesses. The business sector is the engine. We need to put some incentives there for the business sector to grow. This is why I'm proposing those bold tax changes in order to get this economy going. And I'm convinced that it would, just like it did in the 60s, when John F. Kennedy did something similar to that. Just like it did in the 80s, when Ronald Reagan did exactly the same thing. I think we all know now that lowering taxes on businesses and workers is not in the DNA of this president or the Democrats who control the Senate. Why we got to change things in 2012. Now let me tell you a little bit about the state of my campaign. Now remember, I am the only one of the potential Republican candidates that has never held public office. And your reaction has been the same that I have gotten all over this country. But let me tell you what advantage that gives me. The first advantage is my business problem-solving skills that you see in my track record and in my business career. Those skills are applicable no matter what you try to apply to. All of those crises that I talked about, I plan to approach every one of them with the same approach that has worked for me and it has worked for millions of other business people who have been successful. Make sure we work on the right problem. Surround yourself with good people. Put together plans that the American people can understand. Because when the American people understand it, they will demand it and they will support it. And so I did start with war chest. I did start with a very high name ID like some of the other candidates that the media is trying to get into this race. Virginian dollars. But let me tell you what I do have. I have the hearts and minds of a lot of people across this country who are looking for someone who can articulate those common sense solutions. And I have some passionate patriots that are supporting me in my run for the presidency. And we just announced last Friday, for the first reporting period, that my campaign raised nearly $2.5 million, which is very modest, and it will probably be the lowest amount. $2.5 million we raised, and 75% of those contributions came from people who made contributions of $100 or less. And here's the best news about my campaign at that first reporting period: no debt. I'm running my campaign the way I would run a business, which I have done for over 40 years. And I would run this nation the same way. Because when I get asked by some reporters, but do you think government can run like a business? The answer is yes. The problem is, we have not been running it as a business. And I know Belle was there, who I ran into last week in Cleveland. I want to give out a shout out to Belle to let you know that when you put the fear of God in me, there was no way I was going to miss this Skype. And so I'm delighted to be here with you. And so the thing that I want to leave you with before we take some questions is quite simply, this nation is an exceptional nation, or I would be running for president. Secondly, we can fix these problems, but we can't keep waiting. We can't wait past 2012. And just like you are here at this meeting tonight, and just like you are involved in the things that you're involved in, whether that is the Tea Party, the Citizens Movement, 912, the local Republican group, just like you are involved, I am running because it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about those grandkids and all of the little faces that are going to make up the next generations. We want them to have a future in this country like we can. But that means that we are going to have to be what I call the defending fathers. The founding fathers did their job. Now we must be the defending fathers. We must defend the Declaration of Independence. We must defend the Constitution. And we must defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we must defend against the attacks of this free market system. I believe in the United States of America. And I'm not going to sit back and let it become the United States of Europe. Not on my watch, and not on your watch. Steve, I'll be happy to take some questions.
That's where we're going, Herman. Does anybody have any questions?
If you have questions, I've asked you to come over here and just form a line, and then we'll expedite getting over to the microphone.
Now, Herman, I want to thank you. This is your third trip to Ohio. It's 5 days.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for making this main focus on Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. So it's important that we keep you focused on your mission. We'll do our part here in Ohio. You'll be back July 30th.
Yes, I'm